Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video of myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, the first part thereof for September the 1st. My goodness, that's the end of the summer. I will mourn its passing. Right, we have the figures from the Ukrainian General Staff figures. These are the Russian losses for the last 24 hours. All the caveats apply, and some interesting observations here. So Tim White says that today's figures confirm that August did indeed have the lowest casualty rate among Russia's invaders for 16 months, with a daily average of just 929 killed or maimed. The average was almost 150 down on July, which itself was the lowest since April 2024. So we've seen 2 months of decreased, I think, activity. There have been smaller attacks on unarmored vehicles, infantry attacks, but not the widespread attacks we used to see. Indeed, I was just looking at another video from Seversk where a kind of, quote, massive attack was repelled by the Ukrainians, where the massive attack now entails sort of 5-6 pieces of armoured equipment and whatnot. So, yeah, things have definitely changed along the front lines. We have a helicopter added to this, probably one from the Simferopol airport in Crimea. We're going to talk about that. It looks like 2 Mi-8s were taken out, not a Mi-8 and a Mi-24. But yeah, so the figures are 850 personnel lost, 4 tanks, 17 troop-carrying AFVs. So that is an uptick there, quite a considerable one as well, now approaching the daily average. So that might suggest that yesterday the Russians were attacking a little more in a traditional manner. 49 artillery systems, again high in that category. The Ukraine is still working hard to attrit the Russian artillery pieces, and 94 vehicles and fuel tanks, fairly high there. A single helicopter added today. So that's interesting because we'll come to the helicopter losses in a second. I've got that for later. I'll park that. So, personnel, at least, and this is a Chris O wiki thread, at least 250 Russian soldiers a day are being declared missing or dead by the Russian courts, equivalent to the declared daily losses of the Russian army at the front. This is really significant. So when you're looking at these figures, you're thinking, are the Ukrainians being accurate? And this is kind of why I do these videos on a daily basis. Every single day, it's like, how accurate are these figures? They look pretty accurate. Here's a video evidence for this, but then I say it's hard to know. It's a bit of a guesstimate when it comes to personnel losses because it's very hard to tell how many people are in a building, in an infantry fighting vehicle when it gets blown up, etc., etc. So there's a bit of guesstimation going on there, but it turns out that actually it looks like the Ukrainian General Staff are fairly accurate when you start looking at these other sources. So here we're looking at the court declarations in Russia. So this is, you know, it seems like the numbers declared by the courts jive pretty well with the Ukrainian General Staff, although at least 50,000 men are missing, so you can add them to the figures quite possibly. The Russian government is doing little to help relatives. Medetsona and Medusa reports from by the beginning of August 2025, families of missing soldiers have filed about 50,000 claims to declare their relatives dead so that they can obtain compensation. The vast majority of the missing are indeed likely to be deceased, although you're going to have deserters and POWs thrown in as well. The number of missing is almost certainly far higher than 50,000 due to a number of factors highlighted by the Russian war blogger Anastasia Kashevarova. She complains that even now the Russian military does not have a proper system for tracking them. Quote, there is still no system for searching for missing persons and there is no single verified database. There are many problems in this issue as it affects all aspects of the activities of the MOD. One, lack of and low level of evacuation. The problem of missing persons is directly related to the problem of evacuation. The wounded need to get evacuation point, which is sometimes several kilometers away, and 300 missing turns into 200 dead. So the 300 actually casualties. That's not missing. Casualties turn to dead. Evacuation is further complicated by the serious shortage of personnel at the front. There are very few evacuation teams. Evacuation teams are sent into combat. And as troops advance, there is also the problem of collecting bodies. They are left lying there because the fighting must continue and there's no one to collect the bodies. 2. Inaccessibility of evacuation. Often bodies cannot be evacuated because they are located in territory controlled by the enemy. And the news reported that we had taken the settlement, but in fact we had not. Either the bodies are mined or they lie under rubble and require special equipment. But as soon as the equipment arrives and work begins, enemy drones and shells arrive. 3. Lack of coordination between the MOD, military registration and enlistment officers, military police and the military prosecutor's office, and the Defenders of the Fatherland, FZO, a veterans and family support organisation, and the absence of a unified database and integrated support system or service. On any given day, a soldier's family may receive 3 to 4 different statuses about him: in service, missing in action, killed in action, captured, AWOL. Also from all these different agencies, right? Also, the agencies do not delve into each individual story. It is not difficult to do. The main thing is desire and skill. The 3 of us can handle it. The Human Rights Ombudsman and military police consider the dead to be prisoners of war, while military units recognise soldiers in captivity based on deep fakes. The Ministry of Defence hotline operates completely separately, is extremely difficult to reach, and even if you do manage to get through, the percentage of assistance and reliable information you receive from them is close to zero. 4. A lack of well-coordinated work by government agencies with the families of participants in the special military operation. The problem is not only the military registration and enlistment offices and military units where people are sent, they are not given an explanation of the procedure when a soldier's status changes to missing, captured or killed. Civilian authorities could also help with this, but no one knows this procedure. There are no instructions. In the FZO, in the kind of veterans agency, in military units, in military registration and enlistment offices, in the multifunctional centre, MFC, local public service provider, in the SFR, the Social Fund of Russia, brochures on the procedure for each situation need to be distributed. When signing a contract, they should immediately give the soldier a brochure on what to do if something happens. 5. Families' reluctance to go to the authorities. 90% of those who contacted us about missing persons did not go to the military registration and enlistment office, did not obtain an extract from the order on the soldier's status, and did not submit DNA samples. Many do not even know the soldier's military unit and division, and those who know or have found out dump all the data into the public domain. An infantile authority that remains silent breeds an infantile society that does not want to follow the legal system but looks for easy shortcuts so that someone else will do it for them. People are illiterate in this regard, says Keshavarova, and they are also confused. A man went to the military registration office, mumbled something, was sent away, and went to consult fortune tellers, fake lawyers, swindlers, and the enemy. Everything that is currently being done to inform and protect the rights of the population since the beginning of the special military operation is the service of civil society. The authorities are not just breathing down our necks, they are lagging far behind in this regard, showering the poor with money and privileges, which is backfiring on the state. We need to get things working, provide ideological education, build all the structures, and it's time to stop being jealous that volunteers are doing better in some areas and start involving them in this work. Okay, so all that being said, the very poor organization for registering missing people and finding out about them, on top of that, the courts seem to show that at least 250 soldiers a day are being declared missing or dead. Now, in the Kherson direction, the occupiers, and this is pretty staggering, and not the first time this has happened, mind you, in the Kherson direction, the occupiers staged a shootout among themselves. So the Russians shot up themselves. More than 24 died. I mean, this is a big controversy, or at least it should be. In the Kherson region, a unit of the 24th Motorized Rifle Regiment began shooting at positions of the 127th Brigade, which led to their mistaken assumption of Ukrainian saboteurs and opening of fire. As a result of the chaotic battle, 21 occupiers were killed, another 17 were wounded and hospitalized. After the incident, checks began in the units and control and interrogations of personnel were intensified. Wow. So August the 19th, this happened. Firefight in Kherson, and the motor rifle troops opened fire on the recon brigade's positions, mistaking them for a Ukrainian assault group, killing 21 and wounding 17. Wow. What a cock-up from the Russians there. Now, what else on the personnel front? Long overdue, but the Ukrainian armed forces have begun relocating personnel accommodations at training centres underground. This move is aimed at enhancing protection against missile and drone strikes. This is really good news, and building underground facilities is absolutely what is needed. Here are some pictures of some. I don't know how widespread these are, but it's something that definitely needs to be done far more by the Ukrainians, less so the Russians. Another thread from Chris Owicki. I'm not going to go into this fully, but just to give you the headline: constant threat of Ukrainian drone strikes and tougher restrictions imposed by the Russian army on troop movements in the rear now mean that Russian soldiers in occupied Ukraine live almost like in a penal colony, according to a serving Russian soldier. So this is kind of in contrast to what you see there, where the Ukrainians, and I don't know how widespread this is, but at least in some places have been building underground shelters to protect them, and you know, hopefully there being knock-on effects with logistics. Here with the Russians, less so, as they live under the constant threat of Ukrainian drones, although the Ukrainians will live under the threat of Russian drones largely still, of course, right across the front line. So recent moves by the Russian military administration in occupied parts of Ukraine, known as the zone, have drastically reduced the freedom of Russian soldiers serving there, with infractions being punished by sending offenders into suicide, assaults, so on and so forth. So, you know, simply put, if you are a rear serviceman at a training ground, then you live almost like in a penal colony. You can't go anywhere without an order. You can't cross the border into Russia. There are 3 layers of military police: regimental, divisional, army district, and traffic police all around. Internet access in the rear is severely restricted. Starlink is banned in the rear, and there are constant raids by the military police and other agencies looking to score easy points by confiscating prohibited gadgets. So on and so forth. And then as we come, because it's a very long thread, so we come to the end. So to sum it up, the drone revolution has made rear service in the zone up to 40 kilometers from the front line not as rosy as it is imagined by old warriors and militarists who have not been to the special military operation. And beyond 40 kilometers, no one guaranteed that ATACMS would not fly to you one day with a greeting. Tension is present everywhere in the zone and in the borderlands. So it just gives you an insight. Take it with a pinch of salt. It's a Russian soldiers' views there. Now, another bit of good news for the Ukrainians that has turned up on the socials here, with a picture indicating that somewhere in the Belgorod region of Russia, on August the 26th, 8 officers of the Russian FSB were killed at once as a result of a missile strike. And here, Excel Nova has released a picture of these Russian officers and some kind of commemoration to them. So 8 officers from the FSB dying at once, I think is a very successful strike from the Ukrainians there. They, I think, are busy doing an awful lot of stuff at the moment, and much of it we don't really know about. And we're going to speak a bit about that in the strikes section. Let's go to Andrew Perpetua's loss list. This is going back a few days, though. He's got a backlog, so understand that these are from 4 days ago. And, of course, all the losses that come onto the socials are not necessarily from the day before either, but they're just what were published from, you know, on the socials that day or the day before. So here we have a bunch of Russian equipment here, quite a few bits of artillery. We do have an air defense system at the top by the looks of it, a few tanks and other traditional assets, quite a few trucks actually, a number of ATVs, but not as many as we have seen previously. Ukrainians, a lot of surveillance and comms equipment. We're going to kind of ignore that. A lot of UGVs, ignore them. So you got a few mobility vehicles like we previously seen, in quite a lot of civilian vehicles. Let's go to the Ukrainian stuff first. And like I've explained to you before, we ignore the surveillance and comms equipment because it's not particularly valuable. Well, it's all valuable, but not compared to, you know, these things are only like this big often. And, you know, you compare that to a towed howitzer or something. It's, slightly different kettle of fish. Same with the UGVs, important, but, you know, up to $50,000 worth of kit, whereas a Leopard 2A4, you're talking millions. Right, engineering vehicles, a couple of those on there. Some artillery pieces damaged. Leopard 2A4 destroyed. That's going to hurt. Abandoned and hit by Vandal drone. That's a big loss for the Ukrainians. Another undescribed tank damaged. And then we've got some mobility vehicles, mainly MRAPs, but a few APCs as well. APCs, fairly old stuff, M113s or MTLBs. The mobilities, newer things like Mastiffs from the UK, Kirpi 2 from Turkey, Max Pros from the US, and other undescribed ones. We have an IMV, a recovered IMV there, Humvee. So that's good news, I guess. because I think that's what that means. Well, yeah, Brand 1 recovering that. So what else? We have a couple of captured ZIL-131 trucks. So the Russians captured them, and then quite a few civilian pickup trucks and whatnot thrown in. Typically, as the Ukrainians use them an awful lot. Russians not losing quite as much stuff, I don't think. Well, actually, in terms of artillery, quite a bit there. They've got a Buk surface-to-air missile system destroyed. That's going to hurt. Electronic warfare system, slightly larger one than maybe some of this other comms equipment. And an undescribed radar, so I don't know whether that was a big loss or not. Engineering vehicle, a crane truck. Then we've got 2 Grad, BM-21 Grad multiple launch rocket systems destroyed. A number of D-30 howitzers, couple of MT-12 anti-tank Rapira anti-tank guns, Type 75 multiple launch rocket system, which is actually a little towed one, comes from North Korea. So range of stuff there, most of it damaged, but a couple of Grads destroyed. That's going to be good. Some tanks here, Track Guard and Shed, T-80, T-62, all destroyed or abandoned. And then, another damaged tank, a couple of infantry fighting vehicles destroyed, 3 APCs destroyed. A lot of trucks on the list there. That's suggesting that logistics is difficult for the Russians. Quite a number of ATVs, though not as many as we've seen previously, motorcycles and quads, and then your usual civilian vehicles there too. So that's a snapshot of the losses, although it is from the 27th. Now, we're going to go on to show that the Ukrainians have had a really, I think, a purple patch recently, and I think a lot of this has to do with what's going on in Crimea. And when we hear of massive drone attacks in the night, we often think. So I keep reporting that the Ukrainians sent heaps of drones into over occupied territories into Russia, over the border into Russia, and into Crimea. But it's easy to think, because I think this, that those drones are your big Luti drones that are going to go and try and blow up refineries and these big facilities like that. But actually, a lot of the drones, so we go to these sorts of maps, right? This isn't of Crimea particularly, but the N-Strike and Visioner will release a couple of maps every day and every night and say, well, this and they have this kind of arrow thing at Crimea as well. And you think the next day, oh my goodness, there wasn't massive amounts of data about refineries and bases getting blown up, but what they are invariably, particularly with Crimea, are probably things like the Beaver drones being sent to take out individual bits of equipment. And so the next day we might see no evidence of explosions in, say, Crimea, or we might see some smoke rising from somewhere and think, right, okay, there's supposedly 300 drones sent at Russia last night. Why are we not seeing evidence of this? But it could be that you've got a whole host of drones sent into Crimea that are much smaller. I mean, they're still significant drones. They're not FPV drones, but they are hitting individual bits of equipment, and then Primary unit or Alpha unit then release a montage like a week later that shows a whole load of stuff getting destroyed, and you're like, right, so that's what's been happening with these drone strikes into Crimea, and why we haven't been seeing anything, and then we get a whole purple patch of stuff. And this is one of these purple patches. We've seen a bunch of montages from Primary recently. There's another one out again. Here we have, before we get there, there was a claim last night that an S-300 radar was struck and taken out last night, and that's on the back of an S-400 radar also being taken out. So this is, that's a significant loss already. Don't have the full-on evidence for this, but the claims are that Ukraine managed to destroy that S-300 radar in at Saki airfield. Then we've got some more information on the helicopters that were struck, and I think these are the helicopters that were talked about at Simferopol, where we heard, and I reported yesterday, that a Mi-8 had been destroyed and a Mi-24 had been destroyed up here. But it turns out it might have been 2 Mi-8s, unless these are 2 separate incidences. But that would be unusual, because this is, Simferopol airport is, Fradiska, basically, as far as I can work out. Anyway, Ukraine says it destroyed 2 Russian Mi-8 helicopters, one of which is listed, and I don't know why only one of them is listed on the loss list today. I presume it's one of these helicopters. Anyway, in occupied Crimea, they share footage. Drones struck the Russian military airbase in Fradiska near Simferopol, destroying the helicopters worth an estimated $20 to $30 million. So here is the footage. So the latest strike by the Primary unit again targeted the airbase in Fradiska. Now, I don't think this will be an FPV drone. I mean, it could be. It could be an FPV drone launched from a unmanned sea vehicle, but I think to get to Simferopol, I think that's too far. So this is likely something like a Beaver drone, but it does seem to be quite maneuverable. So I don't know. Successfully hitting 2 Mi-8 helicopters in a separate operation, Ukrainian operatives struck a Russian vessel, likely a tugboat 2190 in Sevastopol Bay. So here is the footage we're getting from the Ukrainian military intelligence of their strike. The Primary unit appears to be one of the most effective units at the moment, absolutely hammering the crap out. So this is moving. This looks to me like it's moving like an FPV drone. So, and I'm saying that this kind of footage indicates maybe Beaver drones and part of those big waves of drones that fly into Crimea. I wonder why it went over that helicopter to hit this one. But anyway, looks like it hit a bit before. I wonder why. That might be why there was only one helicopter they declared as destroyed, because this drone goes and then looks like it hits just here in front of the helicopter, unfortunately. Then we have the tug in the Bay of Sevastopol being hit by another drone. Again, don't know whether that's an FPV drone from a mothership or it is a larger Beaver drone or similar. But they seem to be fairly maneuverable. So Special Kherson Cat says the capabilities that the Primary unit demonstrates are amazing. An operator-controlled munition at a distance of 200 kilometers from the front, at an altitude of several meters from the ground, like we just seen, is something. Flying at such an altitude makes the drones virtually invulnerable to any air defense systems and radar detection. So even when you see, so the airport, that airbase footage, that was already at the airbase, but when we see those montages full of equipment taken out, they are often approaching very low already and going across these fields, these flat fields, and then hitting a radar after being at that low level for quite a bit of time. But actually that's pretty effective for evading air defenses, because if you think about it, like imagine you are standing on the ground with an assault rifle or with a large anti-tank gun or whatever on the back of a truck, right? If you see something that is at 2,000 meters in the air, that means you can see it right over there and it's slowly approaching you, and at the entire time you can see it move over your head. You've got all the time, presumably, that you can see it to acquire it as a target and to fire at it, and then it goes all the way over there. So if they're flying high, they are very vulnerable. If they're flying really high, then there's obviously, the most vulnerable patch is probably, that 2,000 meters, whatever. As soon as you get over that to maybe 5,000 meters, then it's more difficult for these mobile teams to shoot you down, but still possible. But when you're at like 20 meters, you don't see that thing until it pops over the tree line. And by the time you've been able to react to it, it's past you and you've missed it. And so actually flying really low is super, super useful. Problem is connecting to the operators, how you can then have your feed interrupted much more easily, so on and so forth. So the pros and cons. An operator controlled munition at a distance of 200 kilometers from the front at an altitude of several meters from the ground is something. Flying at such an altitude makes a drone virtually invulnerable to any air defense systems and radar detection. And the only reason why this is happening only in the Crimea area is an artificial limitation of the Starlink operating area for Ukraine. If it weren't for that, the controlled drones could strike the entire Russian territory. Wow. So since they now do have, there was all that controversy with access to Crimea with Starlink. Now they do have that. That seems to be what is having an effect there. So incredible stuff. We also have this. So GUR again, Unit Primari continue the systematic process of destroying the air defense systems in Crimea. We have an UTOS-T radar, RT-70 radio telescope, GLONASS complex in the dome, MR-10M1 MEAS M1 radar, whatever these are, and 96L6 AP radar for an S-400 air defense system. I don't know if they are repeating any of these from previous video montages, but again, incredible success for this unit. Now again, this drone is flying low to the ground. Now some air defense systems do spot them and fire at them, but as we've seen previously, they struggle to hit them. Here we have the drone approaching a large radar dome, and one presumes they take it out, and a massive, like that looks like a satellite kind of dome, aerospace communications, and then more domes here. And we have seen previously some of these domes get targeted. So I don't know whether these are separate ones or whether we're seeing a repeat of some of the footage. So, pinch of salt and all that. But radar for an S-400 system then taken out here. They really are having a lot of success primary. And those strikes on Crimea are, like I said the other day, where's it all going? Where's this lead? What is the eventual outcome? Is it going to be some kind of invasion of Crimea with troops, or is it a case of getting planes closer? You completely degrade all these systems. Can you then get close air support? Well, not close air support because you're not supporting troops, but strikes from planes taking out other key infrastructure? I don't know. New satellite imagery confirms Ukraine's strike on a Russian border outpost of Voloshyna. So I reported this yesterday morning. This is Armyansk, top left-hand side of Crimea, where apparently barracks were completely destroyed. And 6 Kivus-class hovercraft were also reportedly destroyed. Now, the claim was that this was cruise missiles that did them. So that there are some claiming that that footage we had of the KP5, the FP5 5.5 Flamingo cruise missiles, that footage I showed you on a breaking news update yesterday might have been footage of the ones actually launched towards these targets here. But I said yesterday, why would you fire those at such a short range, relatively speaking? There's only like 130 kilometers or something from Ukrainian positions, and so I think it could be testing out the FP5 in a kind of in an area where you've got a better idea what the air defenses are, seeing what you can achieve with them before then, because they supposedly have a range of 3,000 kilometers. So this is going to be a test drive for the FP5s before using them elsewhere. But yeah, so lots of footage out of things getting blown up at the moment. I think the Ukrainians having some great success in Crimea. Now, last night they had an 88% success of Ukrainians in intercepting the Russian Shahed drones. 86 of them sent last night, 76 intercepted. That's pretty good. It's very good, really. The 10 that got through struck in 6 different places, but I don't have any information on the Russian strikes in Ukraine. I'll check right now if there's anything else that's emerged. Yeah, actually, no information of anything being struck in Ukraine, so I don't have anything yet. But only 10 drones supposedly getting through, so you would expect far less information to be swirling about. Now, there was supposedly this wide-scale attack on Russia last night. So there were claims that there were as many as 300 drones flying into Russia last night, or occupied territories. As Ensight said, at this moment, more than 300 Ukrainian kamikaze drones are massively attacking the Kursk, Belgorod, Kaluga, Lipetsk, Saratov, Oryol, Ryazan, Rostov and Krasnodar regions, and western and southern Russia. In some cities, loud explosions can be heard, but I never quite know whether that's 100%, because we don't always see the results of these. But then I go back to, well, some of them are smaller drones that are going to be hitting individual pieces of equipment, so on and so forth. Right. A large-scale missile strike involving Ukrainian Neptune and Flamingo cruise missiles is currently targeting the occupied Crimean Peninsula, was the claim last night here from the Dead District, but actually it came from Atesh. Multiple cities are reportedly experiencing powerful explosions. So Atesh, the partisan group, said occupiers suffered losses in Crimea. Atesh agents report that the area of Novofedorivka and Gradiskoye, so that's where the airport was, airbase was, is loud now. Putinists will soon receive news they will not like. Crimeans continue to pass on information. Every detail is important. Crimea is Ukraine. There are losses among the occupiers is another claim. We send greetings to the 12th Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment. So this could be that S-300 radar we have already mentioned. It could be all sorts of other things being struck last night. But not too much detail in terms of battle damage assessment. We do know that here, Kropotkin in Krasnodar region was hit. Big attack in Ukraine by Ukraine tonight, said Tim White last night. Many drones are visiting different regions of Russia, but again, very little is known. This video actually refers to a 330 kilovolt Kropotkin electrical substation that was hit by the Ukrainians, and it provides power to the regional power system and railway communications of the Krasnodar Krai region. That is going to be a case of hitting railway logistics again. Some more pictures to suggest that something is in trouble there in Krasnodar. Okay, then there are claims that the Ilsky oil refinery was also hit in Krasnodar. There are certainly audio. There's audio of that and also some imagery too. But again, don't really have too much more details. Now, Yelabuga was possibly in trouble. Sat CCTV picking up some sounds of explosions near at the Yelabuga Shahed drone manufacturing facility, all the way over in the to the east, 1,300 odd kilometers from Ukraine. Then we have some more. So who knows whether Yelabuga was hit as well. And that's pretty much it. So a few other things from previous days. A civilian ship was damaged after hitting an unidentified explosive device in the Black Sea near Odessa. It's reported that part of the Russian Shahed drone that was shot down previously then detonated under a ship. So it's dangerous. There are a lot of Shahed drones that are shot down over the Black Sea. If you take out the wing, of course, it drops into the sea and may still float, given what they are made of these days, to make them lighter and not detectable by radar. So they try not to make them out of metal, so they can float but still have the warhead intact. And then a big ship like this runs over the warhead, and your big ship goes bang. That is definitely a challenge for the commercial shipping that the Ukrainians are desperate to still have operating out of Odessa. Now we have imagery from Severodonetsk in Luhansk region, where there appears to be a strike. The claim is that there's been a strike on a petrol station, which is interesting. So we know that Luhansk and occupied territories, and in fact Russia as a whole, is struggling with petrol and diesel logistics, particularly petrol. Getting the petrol, gasoline to these petrol stations right throughout the country has been a real challenge, as the refineries have been hit, and there seems to be a bit of a lack. So whether that has then led to Ukrainians thinking, well, if we take out petrol stations, actually that's really going to hurt the local industries and whatnot in these places, I don't know. It surprises me that they would go for a target like this, to be honest. If it was just a general public petrol station, that would then give the Russians permission to go to town on them, except they had previously been attacking stations like that, particularly in the Kherson region. And this has just come out. So when I was just doing some research earlier to see what the latest is, just the only new thing is a strike in Orenburg in Russia that appears not to have achieved intentional. I say that actually, there is a strike on a grain container unit here, hole in it, and grain has pulled out. I presume that's grain and not sand. Anyway, that has been struck in Orenburg in Russia. And then we have, like I talked about Armyansk yesterday morning, it was cruise missiles that struck that. So it could be the Neptune cruise missile. It could have been those FP5s. But yeah, it's interesting that they have been using cruise missiles then. Certainly that's a claim. Right, the Foreign Minister of Hungary, Peter Szijjártó, has complained that the European Commission has yet to respond to his complaint letter that the Ukrainians have been striking the Druzhba oil pipeline and associated infrastructure, according to Index. He accused Brussels and most EU countries of being invested in prolonging the war and wanting to send trillions to support Ukraine, and not obviously answering his complaints that they're hitting the Druzhba pipeline. Now, I put out, and I love you guys as a community, you are awesome. I put out a request to give me some information on what's the best thing to strike if you're looking at taking out an airbase. Is it worth taking out the air control towers? Like, how long would that take the base out for, if at all? You know, what's the highest value thing to strike there? And loads of people answered. It was really good. Thank you. I've just picked out this one. Take it with a pinch of salt. But this is Icaron saying, people often think hitting a control tower will shut down a military airbase, but that's not really how it works. The tower mostly handles visual control, coordination and comms. Almost all of the critical systems are located elsewhere. Radar, landing aids, navigation beacons, lighting regulators, power nodes and comm shelters are spread out across the base. So if you destroy the tower, you'll slow things down, but you won't stop operations. Aircraft can still take off and land using degraded procedures, mobile ATC units, and by diverting to other airfields. Under good conditions, it's a temporary inconvenience at best. Where it gets interesting is where you compare this with carrier operations. US carriers have advanced auto-land systems like ACLS and JPALs, and many Western fighters can also use semi-automated landing via ILS. Russian jets, on the other hand, rely much more on ground control systems, RSBM for navigation, PRMG for landings, PARGCA, and ground controlled intercept. So I don't know what any of that means, but we continue. A few newer models are better, but most Russian forward bases don't have carrier-grade automation. At night or in bad weather, they really depend on those ground-based precision aids. Yes, there are analog backups. You can land planes with handheld lights, Eldest lamps, or signal panels, but those methods are slow, risky, and weather limited. And real weak spots aren't the tower at all. They're fuel, power, landing systems, and maintenance capacity. If you want to cause real lasting disruption, here's what matters most: fuel storage and pumps. No fuel means no sorties. Fires can shut things down for days and tie up emergency crews. Electrical power and backup generators knock out the power and you black out the entire base. No runway lights, no landing systems, no fuel pumps, no heavy maintenance. Generators rarely cover everything, especially at night or in bad weather. Precision landing systems destroy the PRMG, ILS arrays, glide stop antennas, RSBN beacons, and PAR vans, and you make night and poor weather recoveries nearly impossible. Maintenance bottlenecks take out engine test cells, avionics shops, and spare parts depots, and over time sortie rates collapse as jets pile up awaiting repairs. Munitions storage, damaging these forces immediate stand downs until safety checks are complete. Runways and taxiways can also be effective if you hit multiple key intersections at once, overwhelming repair crews. And if you take out local air defense radars and command nodes first, it opens the door for follow-up strikes on those critical systems. The control tower is mostly symbolic. Sure, hitting it slows things down and raises risks in poor weather, but operations can be restored quickly using backups. Bottom line, if you want immediate disruption, hitting the backup generators or main power substations is far more effective than hitting the tower. It throws a whole base into darkness and halts most operations until power is restored. For longer term suppression, target fuel, landing systems, and maintenance capacity. The tower alone won't stop anything. Kill the power first. Great answer there. Thank you very much. Someone also said that they trained as a maintenance crew, airbase technician type, plane technician. He said that there's an awful lot of expertise. And you train almost as long, if not as long, as the pilots to do the kind of jobs that you do there, the very technical jobs. You take out that capability as well, and I don't know whether that's like sort of taking out the barracks or where they billet themselves or whatever, and you can have a real impact on the operations of the airbase too. So lots of answers there. Thank you very much for that interesting stuff. Really appreciate it. Okay, on to other bits and pieces. So Zelensky has just announced that there's been an arrest made in a hunt for the killer of Andrei Parubi. So he was the nationalist Euromaidan attending politician who was murdered by a delivery driver, or so-called delivery driver. They have actually arrested him supposedly now within 36 hours. So that was really that's really good news. Putin has spoken at the Shanghai, so a little bit of geopolitics here because I think it's important. Putin spoke at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. So the SCO, you got the meeting of all these leaders in that kind of BRICS kind of world, if you like, but also I think Robert Fico's turned up from Slovakia. Anyway, Putin blamed the West for the Ukrainian crisis because, of course, and said that the root cause of the crisis must be removed in order for peace to come. So, in other words, we're back to the maximalist claims. That's never going to happen. You're never going to get demilitarization, denazification. So that means getting rid of the elected Zelensky government and getting rid of Ukrainian armed forces. They're never going to admit to that. And so he's saying those are the preconditions for peace. So he's just like, he's not interested in peace. The US needs to be strong now. Looks like Putin has made his choice. He's going to continue the war, says Anton Gerashchenko. And absolutely. He also said that the Ukraine crisis arose not from Russia's actions, but he's blamed the Western-backed coup in Kiev. So he's playing into that narrative again. I hope the, quote, understanding reached in Alaska paves the way for peace in Ukraine. He says the root cause of the Ukraine crisis must be removed for security balance to be restored. So Tim White says Modi has got together, so Narendra Modi has gone to the SCO in China, which is the first time he's been in China in 7 years. Is it China and Russia? China, Russia, and China and India, India and Russia. All those three don't really get on well with each other. It's a real marriage of convenience. And Modi has snubbed Western allies. And that should further anger Trump, but of course Trump may well be out of it at the moment. Media report the US president will pressure the EU to also sanction India for profiting on Russian oil. So the claim at the moment, though, is that Trump's really gone after India with secondary sanctions, not because of Russia. He hasn't put any extra sanctions on China or Russia themselves or any other nation that buys hydrocarbons from Russia. Why only India? And the claim from the New York Times is that he phoned up Narendra Modi and asked for Modi to nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize, and that really pissed off Modi. And then that in turn has made Trump really angry because he really, really, really wants a Nobel Peace Prize. So he's gone hard at India, not because of Russia, not because of buying Russian hydrocarbons, but because he wants a Nobel Peace Prize. So that's fascinating. And then India has reacted, it seems, by getting closer to China and Russia. So media report that the US president will pressure the EU to follow up on those secondary sanctions with India. And Trump's bromance with Viktor Orban is under threat after Agent Orange demanded a total ban of Russian fuel imports. So this is really important. So the US has demanded that the EU wean themselves off Russian fuels. But of course, the nations who mainly take on Russian hydrocarbons are Slovakia and Hungary, and they're the two nations that the US, or at least MAGA Republicans, are most pally with. So this is a really interesting situation. Putin himself told the conference, so we've already gone through that. Tim White was giving us the same analysis. Now, what's then interesting is that President Trump has gone AWOL at a time when these people are getting much closer together and solidifying an alternate hegemony, if you like, to the United States. Trump is possibly ill at the moment. He's not been seen really in public for 7 days. He's not spoken in front of a camera for 7 days. And there seems to be this cover-up of his health issues from right-wing influences, which I think is deeply worrying. And these other people will know about that. Now, this clip is then going around again, which I think is fascinating in the context of what we were just talking about.
You need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. You need Trump.
So he's saying, you need me back. This was back when he was debating Kamala Harris. He's like, they're afraid of me, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, those three nations are getting together and having a jolly and not looking in the least bit afraid. And Putin is now reiterating his maximalist claims. So we are back to where we were 7 months ago. And unless Trump puts on sanctions on Russia, Trump will have achieved precisely nothing, and in fact pushed these people closer together. It's an absolute strategic disaster, I think, Trump's positioning, and unless he follows through now. But analysts are telling the New York Times that by hitting EU offices So when Russia struck Kyiv the other day and hit the EU delegation offices and the British Council offices, and by hitting the US-run plant in Ukraine, Russia has signaled it would resist Western-backed peace efforts and long-term security commitments. In other words, all the information is pointing towards Russia not being interested in peace. So it's now up to Trump to do something about that. Because he's the one that has been making all these threats. 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 50 days, 10 to 12 days, 2 weeks, blah, blah, blah. Nothing ever comes of it. Nothing. Meanwhile, Friedrich Merz has said Russia's war in Ukraine is to last a long time. The German Chancellor said in an interview yesterday that he expects Russia's war in Ukraine to last a long time, as most wars end in military defeat or economic collapse, a scenario he does not foresee for Russia or Ukraine. We've had J.D. Vance talking about, hey, these all end in diplomacy. That's why we need to sit down to do diplomacy. And he talked about the Second World War. And he just doesn't know. His Second World War ended because the US dropped a bunch of atom bombs on freaking Japan, and Hitler blew his brains out in a bunker. It wasn't. Diplomacy happened after the capitulation. So, J.D. Vance doesn't seem to know what he's talking about, which is a worry, because if Trump is ill and is replaced by J.D. Vance, I think J.D. Vance is going to be ideologically even more aligned to Russia. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is a plane carrying Ursula von der Leyen. She's had some really important meetings in particularly Poland. There's a lot to be said about her meeting with Tusk in Poland. Talking about immigration coming through Belarus and trying to deal with European immigration, while also talking a lot about the Poland's position. And then she flew to Bulgaria and admitted that Bulgaria is producing presently 1/3 of Ukraine's ammunition, which I think is very interesting. We heard at the beginning of the war a similar thing when they were desperate for Soviet-era ammunition. Bulgaria still makes it, and so loads of stuff came from Bulgaria back in 2022. Well, apparently that appears to still be continuing. So, but a plane carrying her to Bulgaria, Ursula von der Leyen, was forced to land in Bulgaria using paper maps rather than all the electronic gubbins. Suspected Russian GPS jamming disabled its navigation. This is a hybrid attack. So Anton Gerashenko says this is nothing else but a hybrid war that Russia wages against Europe. Now, Friedrich Merz has been upfront about this, admitting that Germany is involved with a hybrid war. At least, he said that Russia is at war with Germany effectively, and I think all European leaders need to say this, and I think the American leader needs to say this as well. Let's name things that are as they really are. Russia has made an assassination attempt of the president of the European Commission. Russia has been jamming GPS signals over many Eastern European countries that are in its immediate vicinity. There have been countless similar cases with vessels in the area. These situations have not been unique. There was no reaction, so they become standard practice for Russians. Oh, it's what the Russians do, and this is how Trump answered it the other day when he was asked, in fact, a number of times, asked about similar things like this. Oh, it's what the Russians do. That shouldn't be the reaction. It's like, no, the Russians shouldn't do that, and we're going to react to it. So they become standard practice for Russians. We will see what kind of reaction there will be now, if at all. If there's any at all. Anyway, that's enough from me. Hopefully that was of use and interesting. Thank you so much for your support. Really do appreciate it. Thanks to Paul Spiker, who supported the channel so much. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.